Welcome to the special called meeting of Lynchburg City Council for the purpose of conducting our first slate of interviews for school board appointments or reappointments to vacancies that will exist June 30th, 2024 in school board districts 1, 2, and 3. We have a packed agenda today, interviewing all members from District 2 and partially from District 1. Due to the sheer number of qualified candidates, we will keep interviews to 30 minutes. Candidates, please keep your answers concise, and council members, please be prepared with your questions. I'll call on members in roll call fashion, starting with Councilmember Wilder. Let's limit our questions to 1 per round with the goal of getting to at least 2 rounds. These interviews today will be conducted in an open session, and it's important to remember that this public meeting serves as a way to have open dialogue between candidates and council members. My expectation for audience members are to be mindful of this process while in council chamber, and as always, applause, cheers, or jeers are not permitted. With that, I'll ask Ms. Finney to address a few housekeeping items before calling on our first candidate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I'm sure the public is well aware, we were scheduled to start at 9 today, but our 9 a.m. was Dr. Atul Gupta. He was unable to make to the slot, so we moved him to Monday. Another candidate who is unable to interview today was Cynthia Deutsch, scheduled at 11:30. So if council pleases, you could take a break at that moment, or if the next candidate is available, maybe move on. But we can address that as we get closer. And that is all I have for you. So with that, we'll call on our first candidate. That's Jordan Nesbet from District 2, followed by Jabr Poe at around 10 a.m., also in District 2.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning. Yeah, you can have a seat if you want. Okay, Dr. Wilder, go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate that. You're willing to serve on the Lynchburg School Board. Over the past, Lynchburg City School has about 15 plus programs that address learning loss and various other programs for credit recovery, acceleration, and various other programs. Which programs are you most familiar with? And also, which one do you really suggest or want to implement to address the improvement of test scores in our school system?
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues I as a parent have found with LCS is the difficulty to find information on the website. And so I'm aware of those programs, but only because I have regularly been attending school board meetings, watching school board meetings when I'm not there. And so I know of a few of them, but not a whole lot. One of the biggest programs, which I know is currently a pilot program, but at the LCS Restore, that program seems to be effective, at least from what I can tell. Of course, I don't know that there's any real data released on how those students performed prior to and then once being rehabilitated back into a base school. But it is something that I believe has a lot of hope and potential to continue growing if they can put in the time and effort and resources needed to improve that. But also, I really appreciate the CTE programs and their desire to expand those down into the middle schools. And then, because I believe that's really where we capture kids and giving them actual skills that they can utilize beyond, rather than just, hey, continue on with higher ed. What's your plan? Where are you going? Catching them early on, giving them the skills that they need to have real world experience when they become an adult, because higher ed's not for every student. And so that ability to show them an area of interest that they may not recognize, and then be able to support them in that and continue on in their journey. I really appreciate those CTE programs.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being willing to serve. On your application to the city, you address budget issues. You want to tell us a little bit about your budget experience and what challenges would you address?
Yeah, so my budget experience, I don't have necessarily an extensive amount other than just personal budget, but then also in some of the volunteer capacities I worked over the years, and also in my current career. I do have to help with budget sometimes when it comes to raises for my employees or other technology issues, things that come up, being able to make sure that we're staying within those guidelines that of course come from up above us. One of the biggest budget issues I think with LCS that I would want to tackle is I feel like there needs to be more transparency. I know through watching these council meetings, school board meetings, all the questions from public comment, there's been a lot of question about, well, how did these numbers come up? Where did these come from? And I think better transparency on what that is, giving that information ahead of time. And then I think LCS did a great job this year going back and making cuts, trimming the fat where things needed to be trimmed because they knew that they had a lower budget than what they said they needed to work with. I think looking into that maybe at a deeper level to continue making those improvements. At the council meeting last night, a citizen said that you sell bad investments and you reinvest into good ones. And I really like that ideology, and I think that there may be some things that we can adjust in the LCS budget and reinvest into those things that are being productive and are winners, so that way we can then continue to grow those programs.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Morning.
I guess rather than drilling you with questions, maybe if you want to just give an intro, will be my question to why you want to run for school board and what you think you can do.
Yeah. So I have spoken at school board. I've spoken here in front of you guys. I obviously got really involved with the decision to close Sandusky. I'm a Sandusky mom. But that really, through working with those people alongside those groups, kind of unintentionally threw me into a deep dive into how things work here in Lynchburg. And I've said before, I'm a transplant from Arkansas a couple years ago. And things are much, much differently ran there than they are here in Virginia, and specifically Lynchburg. And so in figuring that stuff out, I've kind of found this passion for really being involved. And prior to this, I was a parent that was just like, here you go, here's the money, take care of it. If you need me, let me know. But otherwise, you guys can do it, you're great. And I've realized that that doesn't necessarily fulfill me as a parent, at least not where I'm at now. And so I want to be involved in making a better LCS for the future. I want to not only set my kids up because they're very young for success through LCS, but I want all the other kids that are currently now, through working with Sandusky, I've grown very attached to the whole school and the kids as a whole. And then through different programs my kids have done, sports and summer programs now, becoming attached to just the kids of Lynchburg as a whole. And I think I had a really great small town school where I grew up in Arkansas. And I know it's much different in an urban area, but I can see how much more those kids need than what I necessarily grew up with. And I just want to be a part of that change. I want to be a part of bringing fresh sets of eyes to things. I want to be a part of coming up with creative solutions. I want to be a part of the conversation more than anything. I feel like a lack of communication has happened between the city, the school board, and the parents and the community. And I want to help bridge that gap. Thanks.
Councilman Jones?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
That's not my only question.
Okay.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. How do you feel about charter schools?
About charter schools? I don't necessarily know a whole lot about charter schools. My only experience, one of the districts where I lived when I had my children, they had a charter school, and I know that it was extremely successful. And we saw lots of really great kids go through that and come out far ahead of other peers. And it really worked for those kids in that area. And so I think that there are some really great positives that could come from that if we can make it work for kids that it works for. I think not every child is going to benefit from that. It may not work for this city. It may not work for the school district. It's all about looking at the data, looking at what you really have, and then determining if that's a fit there. I think that there's a positive to them if they work where they work.
Councilman Taylor?
Hi, praise the Lord. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
All right. One question.
Okay.
How do you feel about certificates of completion versus diploma?
By certificates of completion, do you mean like a GED or
Just
just a certificate of completion?
the certificate of.
Okay. If it's going to afford citizens, because at that point, they're becoming citizens of Lynchburg. If it's going to afford citizens the opportunities that they need, then I don't see an issue with it. I think as long as we are setting them up for success and allowing them to become productive members of the community and society as a whole, then it works. I don't think you need a diploma from high school any more than you need a college degree to be successful, if that's not truly the path that you need to be on. Every individual is different when you take into account any childhood trauma or adverse experiences they've had, demographics, ability, education levels, resources available to them, and then factor in any neurodivergencies or social struggles. Those things can oftentimes be a very big hurdle and can take kids off track, where if they could just do what works for them, find the path for them, and if that completion certificate is going to allow them to continue on to that next step, then it definitely is worth it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Vice Mayor Frawley?
Thank you for interviewing. There's many directions we could go, many questions we could ask, and a plethora of, quote, issues that we could consider. What is the number one threat to Lynchburg City Schools being successful at this time?
Ooh. Coming in with the hard hitter. Well, with the plethora of questions we could ask, there's a plethora of answers we could give there, and that really is going to be a very, I think, opinionated decision, because the number one threat for me may not be the number one threat for someone else. I think I'm going to stem it back to the number one threat is the communication failures. Because when you don't have effective communication between all involved parties, that's going to ripple effect through everything. You can't truly accomplish and be successful at anything without that communication. And then there's a lot of things that fall into that umbrella of communication, of course, transparency and due diligence. And I really believe that all of the issues that Lynchburg faces, all of the threats that we have right now that are causing these low graduation rates, low attendance rates, all of the data things that we can say the school needs to see improvement in, all of that, the first step is communication there. That's the biggest threat, because you've got, currently, you're experiencing what appears to be a city council that doesn't necessarily trust the school board, or at least at one time it didn't, in this past year that I've seen. And then you've got a school board, a school administration that is pushing blame back on city council. And then you've got parents that are coming in and getting the blame. And it's been just this big mess of he said, she said, they said, well, they did this, they did that, and pointing fingers instead of enough focus on problem solving. And there's been a lot of saying one thing, backtracking, no, wait, let me clarify. We didn't give enough information for that. And it's wasted time, frankly. It's lack of communication, I think, is the biggest threat.
How are you?
I'm good. How are
Good
you?
to see you. I am ironically wearing coincidentally wearing my Razorback red today, so woo pig. So I'm going to ask the same question to everybody, so just so you know, this is going to be for everyone. If you were to, I'm sure you said you've been watching the school board meetings, and there's been a lot of controversial things that have happened this past year, specifically, year and a half. What, if any, decisions that this current school board has made do you disagree with in this past year and a half?
Okay.
And why?
Yeah, that's really a really great question, actually. One of the biggest things, I think, is, really, there's probably a list I could go through.
Highlight one or two.
Yeah, I will. Well, I'll just start kind of chronologically. So first, of course, the decision for the school closures. Not because I don't believe that schools in Lynchburg need to be closed, because if the data's there, if the funding's not, those things, I recognize that's a possibility, and it very well could be and probably is a reality. But it's the route that they took to come to that decision and how they did it, especially with conversations that have happened since then. It very much felt like, as a parent and community member, that the entire process were putting the cart before the horse, so they were making decisions without plans on how to execute them. The next thing, I think the handling of that GSA grant. Not necessarily because I support or don't support one way or the other, but I think watching that whole process, there was huge communication failures. There were repeated questions asked that had already been answered. There was information that was misunderstood. There was not enough information given about their reasoning for the decisions that they did make. And then there was huge ripple effects that then affected grants that come after that and will continue to come after that, with now they're wanting to change their whole process of how they do this. And for things that might not necessarily have been warranted in that reason for deciding to not accept that grant. And I don't necessarily think that they had realized the impact it was going to make on future decisions. And then also the budget discussions. Again, so much miscommunication, misinformation, things being put on board docs and agendas, and then them saying, oh, wait, we didn't communicate enough. That wasn't the purpose of that. Here's why we really did it, or here's what this was. And then just it took lots of questioning and lots of prompting from parents and community members to get clarification on things. An example is like, what Councilmember Missions pointed out with the admin budget continually going up and up and up, when in reality that included healthcare and attendance and security clerks. We didn't know that either until shortly before council figured that out, or was told that. And those things, that transparency being done ahead of time, saves so much trouble and issues and delays in the process. And so I think just the decisions that they made, they very easily could have just given a detailed budget or broken those out into separate subcategories. And it would have solved a lot of those issues in the back and forth with that. And so I think the decisions to present things the way that they do is another really poor choice.
Okay, thank you. Can,
Rather than, since we all asked one question.
do I have to go back in order?
No, unless you want to.
Dr. Waller?
No.
Go ahead.
You had put, the school board has an F in communication, since you're talking about that. So with that, and a lot of the things that you mentioned, are they the school board's failure or the administration's failure? You mentioned about the budget numbers, which have been constant flux from the administration. The administration has given some of the last numbers, I think, very short time frame before the school board has to vote on it. So with that, do you see that as the school board, or do you see the administration? I know you put in here that the school board, you give them an F.
Yeah, I think that they go hand in hand, because while it is the administration providing those numbers, it is just as much the school board's responsibility to charge the administration with, we need these numbers by this date, or we need better communication, and very clearly voicing those expectations to them and holding them accountable to those things. And I think that accountability has lacked both ways. And so I think they're kind of one and the same in most of these regards.
Dr. Wilder, do you have a question?
Okay, again, thank you again. We appreciate you coming in today. Now, I've served on the school board for 9 years and city council for 8 years. I'm the only person here from Lynchburg City Schools, so I have a passion for schools and the education process. Now, over the past years, we've seen some challenges with the relationship between school board and city council. What can you bring to the table to make that situation more cohesive?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that drove me to kind of apply for this position, was through working with the Sandusky closing and those groups and the PTO. I served on the PTO this past year as well for Sandusky. Working with those groups, I think we had already begun that process of becoming a bridge between council and school board, and we saw that with the decision to set aside the funding, rearrange those projects that you guys had, the funding to keep those two schools open this year. And it was just the willingness to go from one to the other and the back and forth and kind of be that communicator to help open the doorway. And that doesn't include just coming and speaking at meetings. That includes sending emails or talking to people when you have them. I think Vice Mayor Feraldi, we kept him at the school the couple times he showed up until fairly late in the night, just picking his brain about things. And it was very beneficial for me because I did not know much about Virginia and how it ran, and really was trying to figure it out on my own. And so I believe that I have the dedication to want to figure things out. I want to understand how things work and the big picture. And I also, through my career, I've really developed a skill in understanding how my portion of what I do and my responsibility and my task affect not only my team, but then also the links that go out from that and kind of the ripple effect that happens just from a single decision or word that one person makes. And so I want to be able to bring that perspective and those skills to school board to where I can look at every perspective. I can hear what city council is saying. I can hear what my fellow board members would say, and then hopefully be able to find a gap there and build that bridge to close that gap and make that solution, or be able to even change maybe some miscommunication school board has. Talk to council members and be like, no, actually, this is what we meant. This is the plan that we're going on, and even doing that with the community. I pride myself on the ability to truly look at all scenarios and hear from all different types of people with all different perspectives and take what needs to be taken from those, and acknowledging that I don't always know the right path. The school board may not always know the right path, and we have to be willing to hear other people out and make those adjustments instead of digging our heels in just because we made a decision here.
Thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
So you answered, excuse me, you answered the question about how you feel about charter schools. I would like to ask you how you feel about the public school education system as we know it today in Lynchburg. Are you a champion of public education?
Yes, I am a huge champion of public education. I believe, kind of default back to private education works for those that it's going to work for, but private education also has the ability to tailor that to fit those kids that it's going to fit. In public education, you guys have heard more times than not that enrollment is declining, but the cost of meeting those students' needs is continuing to rise because we're finding students that are much more diverse than they've ever been. Whether that be those childhood experiences, neurodivergencies, social issues, recovering from a pandemic, all of the things that those kids come up against. And public education is challenged with, and really is the only ones that have the opportunities to meet those kids exactly where they're at. And in a world where, in society where things are continually getting harder for families, the cost of things going up, and jobs not necessarily meeting that inflation cost or the rising cost of things, and parents, guardians, whoever that adult is in that child's life, are already having a hard enough time, the school is able to step in free of cost, with the exception of school supplies and those other things that come up, but even still provide assistance in those areas as well, to still give those children a true opportunity to be just as successful as those kids going to private school and that may have better resources than they do. I think public school is essential to our society. It's where truly we raise citizens. It's where some kids receive love and care and are taught how to be a good human.
Councilman Mischins?
Stick with me for a second on this one.
Okay.
So last year, the school board adopted policy 2ARZ, which is identification and notification regarding sexually explicit instructional materials. They decided to go with a, I think it was like an opt-out policy, or I can't remember, did they do opt-in or opt-out? Either one, there was two different ways they could do it.
It's an opt-out
It's
policy.
an opt-out policy. Haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. And I obviously was in support of them doing an opt-in policy. Now, part of that policy states that the instructional material is to be listed on the website. So now we are here a year and a half later, and I have it up in front of me right now, the supplemental reading resources catalog to support parental notification of policy 2A for both Heritage High School and East Eagle High School, and there's nothing on it. What do you have to say about that?
Again, I'm going to point that back to the inability to find things via the LCS website. And that's, you can pick any topic, any school, and the likelihood you're going to find it, slim to none. And I think in this instance, it's a very big problem because that's a very hot topic and it's a very sensitive topic for a lot of families. And needing that information available can be the difference between a child attending and a child not. And it can be the difference in a child receiving that education and a child not receiving that education. Because if a parent can't find what that child's going to be exposed to, why would they opt in for that? They're going to, of course, opt out. And so that's something that I want to champion for. You know, I've already started that as a citizen, but I want to continue that path on school board, is holding admin accountable for making sure that those things are done correctly. If we say we're going to put it up, we need to make sure we have it up. To me, that's common sense, which isn't always common, I know. But yeah, I think that we have to have those resources readily available, because the term sexually explicit content has to be utilized, but what does that actually look like? You know, what is it sexually explicit because it is including biology material? You know, if you look at a high school biology book, you're gonna see sexually explicit material because it talks about genitalia. That's part of learning about science, especially as you get into those ages. And so if we can't provide that information of what it is, parents can't look at it, can't research it, can't find out that, okay, sexually explicit here truly just falls in line with what they're being taught in more detail. It's not something overly graphic for that age, and that it is age appropriate. Or vice versa, they find, no, this is inappropriate, and then steps can be taken to make those changes. We have to have that information readily available.
Thank you.
Well, we are right at 10 o'clock, so thank you so much for your time, Ms. Nesbet. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, Madam Mayor, the next is Jabr Poe from District 2, followed by Mark Tinsley at 10:30, also from District 2.
How y'all doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a good day to be live in the city of Lynchburg.
It is. Have a seat, and per Councilman Helgeson's recommendation, why don't you go ahead and give us a 1 or 2 minute introduction as to why you would like to be considered for the school board before we start our questions.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jabr Poe. I'll start off with that first. And in terms of why I want to be on the school board, what better reason than the fact that I have 4 children back there that attend Lynchburg City School. The fact that I, as Dr. Wilder expressed and said, I am a product of Lynchburg City Schools. I'm a native of Lynchburg City. I'm rooted here. I work for the city. I believe in Lynchburg. I know Lynchburg history. I know we have issues. And to be honest with you, above all of those things, I feel motivated and pushed by a higher power. And it's not so much about the school board, but Lynchburg in general. Being a person that has a lot to give and wanting to be productive, what better way than to be on the school board? Also, I believe I bring a different dynamic to the current school board. I know a lot of times we look at credentials, education, doctorates, degrees, but there's a different dynamic. There are certain things that certain people have that you can't teach. Networking, collaborative efforts, drive. Also, I realized that our city schools have a certain population, and that population is about 50% people that look like me, and we can't ignore numbers. And I also had the privilege to be raised by my father, and fathers are very important in the lives of children, along with mothers, that balance. And so there are certain assets, right? Certain things that we learn when we grow up, and unfortunately, a lot of our youth don't get those disciplinary directive that teach them how to go to school and be productive and learn. And having that background is something that I want to interject and bring, to the table. Discipline, how you act, how to behave, how to be a good citizen, how to be a steward. I think it's important that the youth get to be more politically charged, get to see council meetings, understand what goes on, and not just take a test to push you through. For me, it's a practical reason. And again, above all, there's a higher power to drive me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll let Dr. Wilder start the questions.
Thank you so much for coming in today, and thank you for your willingness to serve. We appreciate you being a servant today. Questions? The Lynchburg City School System has about 15 plus programs, a plethora of programs to address learning loss, to address achievement gap, to address credit recovery, and various other things. Which programs are you most familiar with? And also, considering we have some challenges on test scores, what would you like to see implemented in our school system to help improve test scores?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Having a bit of a cold, so I may have to clear my throat a couple times. Take a little bit of water. So as other candidates have stated, finding information on a lot of the programs is a little hard to do with the way the LCS website is set up. But when we look at reading, which we know literacy is one of the biggest scholastic issues, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I like to look at the pre-K program, because if we can get kids learning to read early, that'll curve what happens later on down the road, because between the first up to the 3rd grade, we're learning to read. After the 3rd grade, we should be reading to learn. So with that being said, I would like to look at that program. Also, there's a reading readiness program. I think we should definitely be focusing on that. One of the programs that I have a lot of interest in is the CTE program. I'm really big on vocation, working with your hands. You take somebody like Councilman Taylor, who's a carpenter, goes out, uses his hands. My father is also a business owner. I know too many individuals that are in vocation. I was just looking, Frito-Lay is hiring for a maintenance mechanic. Starts at $33, almost $34 an hour. It said 18 or up. These are skills that we can learn early in life. There's no reason that at the middle school and high school levels that we shouldn't be pushing vocation. I took machine trades under Jeff Sliker at EC Glass High School. When I graduated, I was ready to go in the workforce as a machinist. I'm not a machinist now, but that's a skill that I acquire. And these are the important attributes that we need to really be concentrating on for our youth. Now, there was a second part to your question.
Well, just see, considering our test scores, what would we like to see implemented to help improve some of our test scores?
Right, so the 3 R's. You know, I'm not big on SOLs, but that's what we have right now. So in terms of improving our test scores, one of the things that I would say is it's all about what's functionally responsible. What is it that when you go to school and you read, we should be concentrating. We shouldn't be just moving a student. If you can't read, then we may need 2 reading classes, 2 math classes. We need to concentrate and make sure that we take students and kind of build a profile, if you will, to really understand what that student's needs are. If we take this blanketed approach, that's not going to work because different students have different needs. I work with the youth, and there's no way that when I work with the youth that they have different needs. They come from different backgrounds. Some have parents, some don't have parents in the home. So it takes a more of an approach where it's more customized, if you will. And so if we concentrate on the 3 R's, that is, and making sure that if a student isn't achieving, going in and finding out, well, why is this student not achieving? That's what's important. If we don't know why, then how can, if you have a problem, you don't even really understand what the problem is, how can you come up with a solution?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve.
Sure.
And you seem to have a great grasp of the needs and the challenges of students. I'm just wondering how your experience will help drive board decisions on implementing some of the ideas that you might have.
Can you repeat that one more time?
So my question is that how, you have a lot of ideas about what should be done.
Right.
How would your experience that you have personally help drive board decisions in implementing some ideas that you might have?
Sure. So for the last 6 years, I've worked at the Lynchburg Group Home and Detention Center as a relief staff. And our residents at the group home are basically a lot of the youth that have been kicked out of school for truancy, for different various reasons and things. When we get them, the buck stops there. There's, unless they go off to detention or somewhere else. And so being involved with that, I've learned how to, like when I get a kid, one of the first things that I do is read their file. So I know I don't say something that may generate, a bad behavior, or, say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And then that gives, once I understand what their file is, what they're dealing with, if they're dealing with mental issues or social issues, different things of that nature. And then the next step is to build trust. Once I build trust by, whether that's just spending time with them, talking to them about their day, taking them out to do certain activities, they start to lighten up, and then they start to talk to you. And once you establish that, then you can start to do some work. And so that would be one of the processes and one of the things that I would share with the other board members, share with teachers, share with students. Also, we have to look at what types of culture that our youth and students are coming from. Every person or every teacher doesn't always understand certain cultures. and having someone on the school board who can be in an ear and say, hey, when you're dealing with this situation, this is how this mannerism and this is what this means. You know, when you have that understanding, then you can, that sitting at the table along, that balances out to make more of a collective board. So we have some understanding of actually how the parents and how the kids actually feel, you know. So that's one of the things that I bring that probably will be unique and different.
Thank you.
Councilman Helgson?
Good morning. You, in your introduction, you had mentioned about your father
Yes, sir.
being there in the home.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, when you hear that's very encouraging to where you're understanding the root problems of lots of issues that we're
Yes, sir.
having in the school system. And I'm glad to hear that you're carrying on that same tradition with your 4 children. On the school board, there are sometimes that it's you know, it's great from a role model perspective, and that's very much needed. On your application, you said that you're dedicated to finding efficient ways to utilize the budget. Is there something that comes to mind now that's been recent that you think would be utilizing some of those efficiencies?
That's a good question. So when I mentioned that, one of the biggest things that comes to mind, and it's easy for me because I'm already doing it. I'm already involved in community heavily. Excuse me, sorry. We have a lot of we are program rich in our community, but we lack the communication. We lack the network. You know, IT is my main job, and I understand networking from a digital standpoint, but it's really no different, you know, in real life. And I don't believe that we are utilizing our community and our network. This is one of the reasons why I brought symbolism of Lynchburg City and LCS, because separate, we don't get things done. But when we work together and then we add community piece to that, that's a whole different array. And so why not utilize the community that already have those services? That alleviates that budget piece, you know?
So if I may follow up, so the efficiencies may be combining IT with the city and the schools, or finance, like, is that what you're referring to? The city's finance department versus the schools? There's lots of duplicative services.
Now, that could be difficult in terms of because how things are established. I'm thinking more on the side of definitely a collaboration. Now what you're talking about, I'm not, I would say look at that. I'm all about taking and looking at data and looking at the numbers and seeing if that works. But what I'm more talking about is the community-based programs. To me, it feels like with LCS, it's almost like if you don't know the right person or the right people, and you have a good community service that you're providing, it's hard to collaborate for whatever reason. I would like to change that. But definitely to your point about city and Lynchburg, I think there are definitely ways that we can collaborate.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Mitchell?
Jabr, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you, sir?
Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
So, a couple quick questions that are just very simple, and then we'll kind of dive into them. So
Sure.
You work in IT at the city, right?
Yes, sir.
And you guys share a building with LCS IT, right? Is it the same?
Yes, sir. Same building.
Kind of dovetailing on what Councilmember Helgeson said,
Yes, sir.
how could we accomplish an efficiency by combining IT of both the city and the school division?
Getting both directors at the table, starting with leadership, and seeing, how can we work these things out? Because we do reside in the same building. And, I've been in that building for about almost 12 years. So I started as an intern, worked my way up from the bottom. And I worked for free. This is an unpaid internship. While I was working full-time and taking classes at CBCC. I have to say that when I first started working there, the, temperature, if you will, between LCS and the city, to be in the same building, the camaraderie, there were sometimes people didn't even speak to each other. For example, our networks cross. We have core, and I don't want to, give up, information that probably people shouldn't know, but we have core sites that cross that are on LCS property. Sometimes I myself have had to replace networking equipment and get into an LCS building. And it was very hard to navigate that, to the point, by the way, we started a bowling league after hours that encompasses LCS and the city of Lynchburg. So I had met a couple custodial workers, and I tried to work with our leadership to get into that building, and it was just a struggle. So I just called one of the custodial staff, said, man, I got to get in one of the schools, and that's how I alleviated that problem. But I 100% agree that we should definitely take a look at, can we combine this? Does it even make sense to do this? There are certain cities where the school system and the city as a municipality, it's all the same. It's not divided. And I don't know the history of why we do it like that. But again, definitely something we should take a look at.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Taylor?
Praise the Lord, brother.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
Hear you talking about the higher power.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The discipline problems in the schools.
Yes, sir.
You touched on that where you send kids to this home or that home or over to 4th Avenue. What will you do to solve those problems, to stop it? We don't have to send these kids to a special school because of their attitudes. We need to fix their attitudes.
I 100% agree. And so I've identified a couple things. I'm glad you asked me that, because I feel like this is one of my expertise, because I work with whether they murdered somebody or whether they are out for truancy. And so anyway, I had mentioned student profiles. Understanding the youth that you're working with is really important. Another thing that I looked into, if we think about one of the incidents that happened in the classroom, I know there are video cameras like in the hallways. I would like to explore, does it make sense to have video camera in the classroom? Why? That's one thing. In our environment, there are video cameras everywhere. So let's say if an incident starts, so you have to get in front of things. That's one of the key, that's how we are able to manage and keep situations down. You have to get in front of it. As soon as a child starts to have an issue or a problem, if you had a video camera in the classroom and you had administrators who had access to that, that's a lot faster. So that's one thing to look at. One of the biggest things is parent involvement. We have to get the parents involved. As soon as, if there is any issue, I think the parents should be notified, no matter how small. As soon as it starts, that way we can start getting ahead of it. It's about getting ahead of these issues, which is a complete 360 compared to when I was in school. My dad came to my class and sat in class with me a couple times, and that was perfectly welcomed. That is not welcomed anymore. Identifying, anybody who's extreme. I've heard things about chairs being, that's extreme behavior, and that's a separate thing. But I would say this, we have to put responsibility in the parents too. Emotional training, emotional intelligence training. You know, not just getting to the root of what is the behavior issue, what's going on, and holding the parent accountable. Where maybe the parent may have to sit there and watch emotional intelligence video or training with their child. Suspension alternatives. I'm more about that. There was a program, I think, that Derek had launched and was heading up, LCS Restore, you know, which I know that's a whole nother, you want to avoid sending them to an alternative school and different things of that nature. But from reading some of the stats, it sounds like that program seems to be working for those students. And then having targeted discipline. One of the things when I was a youth, my dad was very creative. I never forget when, I can't remember what I did, but I remember what he did to me in terms of, I did something, he was like, okay, if you do that, you could land yourself in jail or prison. So since that's how you want to act, you'll stay in your room. You can't go past this time. We'll bring you your food. We'll do things. And I just remember being confined, and I knew then, I was like, this is not a situation that I want to be in. So it was that creative discipline to show me that this is what you could be headed to if you don't do these things. I also believe in incentivizing good behavior, you know, giving the youth something to look forward to. And that also goes into the scholastic part of reading. I know, you know, once a year they have a book rush. Why is that not with the literacy issues? And I'm sliding off of what you asked me. Why is that not a year thing? Because we have reading issues. So we should be pounding that all day. But anyway, that's a whole nother question as far as the discipline. And then I would like to know, you know, because I know principals can't be everywhere, but, you know, can we have like some safety professionals and some outside help within the schools to help curb that? I know, you know, when there's a presence, you know, that helps, because you don't have to worry so much. You know, if a kid knows, hey, you know, Dr. Dills is way over there, then there'll be more. There's more free will, where if they know that strategically there are individuals that are maintaining, that are checking on them, that are coming in classrooms and making sure that order is being maintained, that'll help with some of the behavior issues.
We need strong disciplinarians.
Yes, sir.
What do you think about every student's cell phone in the school, in the classroom?
I am not a proponent of having cell phones in the school. When I was in school, cell phones were invented, but you had to be a doctor or a lawyer or some prominent person to even have one. Matter of fact, you would get expelled from school if you had it because they thought you were a drug dealer, or if you had a beeper. You know, we had pagers back then. And so listen, if I needed to get picked up or driven here, I go to the office, make a phone call, you know, we got it done. So there's no need. I mean, they could be in the locker after school, but in the classroom, that's a distraction to the teachers. Because a kid's gonna be a kid. They're gonna play with a cell phone. And especially now with AI, they really not gonna learn anything. The AI is gonna do it all for them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, we have 3 minutes left, so probably we'll wrap up with the Vice Mayor's question.
Okay.
I believe you heard my first question. It's going to be similar. So we have a number of issues in the city, a number of opportunities for growth, depending on how you would market the question. Plethora of items, a number of responses could be given. In your mind, what's the number one threat to Lynchburg City Schools?
Without a doubt, communication and collaboration. Collaboration is the number one threat, because without that collaboration, We don't have it. That's just what it is from what I can see. It's that siloed mentality, and I feel like that's the issue. Because if we can solve that, then we can begin to solve the behavior issues. We can begin to solve the reading and the writing and the arithmetic issues. We have to have that collaboration between community, city, and the schools. It's everybody's responsibility, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if in 2 minutes you can answer this question. Are there any decisions that the current school board has made in the last year that you can identify that you strongly disagree with?
In the last year, it really just goes back to just the communication piece and just the lack of, collaboration. That I feel like that's the biggest issue that we're facing. We need to collaborate. We need to be together.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for your family coming out.
I appreciate you all's time, and I wish you luck on finding a great candidate. You can go ahead and throw my name on there if you're looking for one.
Thank you so much.
Hey, you too.
Have a great day.
You as well.
All right, next up is Mark Tinsley. Oh, there he is. Okay, Mr. Tinsley, Colonel Tinsley. You could stand or have a seat wherever you feel comfortable. Yes, go ahead. Mhm.
All right.
If you would like, you could go ahead and take a minute or two and introduce yourself and tell us why you want us to be considered for a school board member, and then we'll go on to questions.
Okay. Mark Tinsley. I'm District 2, resident here in Lynchburg for many years, wife and 5 children. Teach over at Central Virginia Community College, teach geology, earth science, oceanography. And I'm interested in serving my community as a school board member. I've had several friends over the years who've served on the school board and have testified to just how much of a blessing it was to their lives, and though very difficult and time-consuming, just how much they got out of it, and how much they felt that they were able to give back to their community. I want to do that as well, and so I've decided to put my name in the hat for School Board District 2.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Wilder?
Yes. Thank you so much for coming in today. We appreciate you willing to serve on the school board and offer your time. Over the past several years, the Lynchburg school system has about 15 plus programs, a plethora of programs that address learning loss, achievement gap, and rest of the programs, also acceleration programs and CT programs and rest programs. We still continue to have some challenges with achievement gaps and things of that nature, and also test scores. Which programs are you most familiar with that you really like in our school system? And what do you recommend they do to address test score problems in our school system?
Well, I'm familiar with early college and the dual enrollment programs through the community college, and certainly teach those students periodically in my classes. I think those are wonderful programs. They get students into the college system early, get them a little ahead of the game, and I believe enhance their learning because they're able to experience something outside of the traditional school environment. As far as achievement gaps, that is a perennial problem, I think, in most localities. And, to sit here at this moment and say, I have the 1, 2, 3 ABC solution to the learning gap issue would be disingenuous. The first things that I want to do if appointed to the school board is to get out and learn, do some fact-finding, gathering, meet with principals, meet with school administrators, talk to my fellow school board members, talk to people in the community, kind of get an idea of where the true problems lie. Because I had a pastor many years ago that said, always look for the problem beneath the problem, right? Like, so many problems that we see are just superficial. They're not the real issue, not the fundamental problem. And so getting to the core issues, I think, is so important. And being some of an outsider right now and not having all of the information, I would need to gather that. And so I would think step one for me would be to get to know the people in the business, right, that have been dealing with this, in some cases, for decades, and to gather all those facts. And then with fellow board members and leaders, determine what the best solutions would be.
Great, thank you.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you articulate for us your understanding of the role of a school board member?
Sure. I think about it as kind of the 4 Ps. People, policies, property, and pay, right? People, obviously students first, but our teachers and staff members as well. Hiring the right people, getting the right people in the right leadership positions, making sure we put our students first and their education first. People should always be number one, I believe. Policies, developing policies, revising policies, analyzing policies, looking at the policies of other maybe surrounding jurisdictions, other places, seeing what's going well, what's not going so well, and again, writing and revising policies for ourselves. So property, obviously facilities, right? Dealing with the facilities of Lynchburg City school systems, ensuring that our students have the proper facilities and resources that they need, that those are well kept and maintained, that we have the right folks doing those jobs. And then of course pay or funding, budgetary matters, things of that nature, and making sure that we, again, resource financially our schools, our teachers, our staff, and our students primarily with what they need to get a good education and to help close that educational gap, that learning gap.
And well, how about the relationship to the superintendent, the school board's relationship to the superintendent?
Well, it's a supervisory accountability role. So making sure that the superintendent is doing his or her job appropriately and doing it within the bounds of policy and budget and all of those types of things. But I think beyond that, it's working with that person and developing a relationship so that it's, not adversarial, but a team-oriented relationship. That's so important in any organization, is that we approach it as a team effort. I think so often, and I'm not saying this is the case in Lynchburg City School System, but so often in organizations that I've been involved in, you'll find that some folks consider what they do as adversarial. I need to be against someone. And that's just not the way I look at it. I think we operate, Lynchburg City Schools includes the school board, includes the superintendent, includes the teachers, staff, and students, and parents, right? So we want to bring all of those groups together so that we can do this job of educating our next generation together. I mean, that's the only way it's going to happen, right? It's the only way it's going to happen effectively, is if we're all pulling in the same direction.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Hodgson?
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
You have lots on your resume and your application. You have lots of experiences, a breadth of experiences as a college professor, as a pastor, and someone that has served in the military for 27 years. How would you take those vast experiences that you've had and actually help improve education for our children in Lynchburg?
I think it comes down to, I'm glad you asked this question, because this has been something I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, I would have never thought to put my name in the hat, as it were, for something like this, because I did not have the decision-making abilities, experience, education, et cetera, to make what I would have considered wise decisions. I would have never considered it. However, I have been blessed. I believe God has blessed me with a lot of opportunities in education, a lot of opportunities, experience in the military, et cetera, that I've gotten to a point now at almost 50 years old where, you know what, I think I can make good decisions. I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I'm more confident in my decision-making ability because of all of the experiences, because of the vast experiences that I've had with different people, different socioeconomic groups, different philosophies. I mean, in the Army, people have this idea that the Army's all conservative, all right, which is, it's not the case. There's a plethora, a spectrum of political opinion and diversity, religious diversity, et cetera, in the military. And in 27 years, I've I've learned to operate effectively in that kind of environment where there's just opinions spanning the spectrum. And you have to be able to work with that. Same thing in higher education, same thing in pastoral ministry. I believe I've come to the point through these experiences that you see in front of you where I have the ability now to make good and wise decisions. Perfect decisions? Absolutely not, right? Do I make mistakes? Every single day. However, I believe I do have the raw materials and the fundamentals that I need, the foundation that I need now to do what a school board member needs to do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Missions.
Thank you for being here,
Thank you, sir.
and thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you. You've answered a lot of my questions with the other council members, so I'm trying to come up with something different. Lynchburg is home to some of the nation, and I would argue the world's leading nuclear technology companies.
Sure.
How can we push a public school system to support that more than they ever have been? Because we need to keep those companies here.
Right. You know, I think so much of any decision like that, and any program, if you will, like that, comes down to partnerships. And we set in a city our size with as many institutions of higher education and a robust community college has an ability, I believe, to partner with these different institutions, to partner then together with organizations in business, to come up with programs, pipelines, if you will, to take students from their freshman year in high school through an education that lands them a job at one of these places. We certainly have unemployment in this area, and if we are innovative, and again, seek partnerships, think outside the box, be creative. I think that's key in the 21st century as well. I mean, in higher education, we're looking now at the enrollment cliff. I don't know if you all have read too much about that, but there aren't as many kids coming up to go to college in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So colleges are really having to be innovative. We've seen, unfortunately, one of our local colleges, Lynchburg, have to do major cutbacks, University of Lynchburg, because of this enrollment cliff that's coming up. They see it, and they're taking proactive action now. I think we have to be proactive as well, looking for partnerships, looking for maybe even direct partnerships with organizations like BWXT, I don't know, but seeking out those types of programs, thinking outside the box, being creative.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Taylor.
I see on your application you got down conflict resolution.
Yes, sir.
You understanding you did military for 27 years in leadership.
Right.
How would you be able to use this to help Lynchburg City Schools?
And I don't know that it's on that resume because they tell you tailor your resumes to what you're applying for. So, but my first job out of college was I was a police officer for 3 to 4 years in the city of Waynesboro, Virginia. I learned a lot of conflict resolution, right? Certainly learned it in the military. And if anybody's ever led PhDs in higher education, they can be a cantankerous bunch, right? So I've had to resolve conflict there as well. So I've had a lot of experience in that. Mm-hmm. I believe the key to conflict resolution is genuine empathy. Being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You may not agree with that person, and oftentimes we don't. When we're in conflict for a reason, right? We don't agree with the other person, but being able to put ourselves in that person's shoes, mm-hmm. turn around, as it were, and look back at ourselves is so key and so important in conflict resolution. I'm able to keep a calm head. I'm able to keep the volume down and have a conversation with people. And I think whatever conflict that be, if it's conflict with a superintendent, conflict with a teacher organization, conflict with fellow board members, council persons, whatever. I think the key is to be able to say, all right, step back, let's take the emotions out of this for a moment. Let me stand in that person's shoes, look back at myself and see how maybe they're seeing things. And then we can have a vibrant and productive conversation.
Thank
And I've learned that over 27 years, I hope. Perfect? No, but I'm getting there.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
What do you believe is the greatest threat to Lynchburg City Schools?
I would say most organizations, it's complacency. Just kind of staying where we are. The old definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting to get different results. If we're having problems, and I don't know all the problems. I mean, I read the paper and I know some of the issues, but I don't know all the problems. I'm not inside, as it were. But I think it's, just recognizing that there are problems and that we've got to move past them, no matter what they are. No matter what they are, we've got to seek solutions to problems. Problems that fester become bigger problems. I had a commander in the military one time, I love this, and my kids have heard this a million times, my wife's heard it, but he said, problems are not like fine wine. They don't get better with age, right? And I totally agree with that. We've got to take problems head on. And complacency on any problematic issue within Lynchburg City Schools is the greatest threat. We've always got to be looking forward. As Councilmember Mischin said, what do we do? How do we create pipelines for our students? How do we ensure that the student, no matter his or her socioeconomic background, no matter where they come from, right? How do we get that student to a point where they have a job and are a productive Lynchburg citizen? And I use the word citizen. We want citizens, right? We want people who are giving back and receiving from the kids. It's a give and take. How do we help our students get to that point?
Okay, so I had said I was going to ask everybody the same question, but I feel like I got to change it up a little bit. Just because as I'm listening to everybody's questions, I'm just kind of getting, my mind's kind of going all over the place. As you know, and we all know, school boards have become political, I think even more so than councils in many towns and localities around the country. We're seeing politics in classrooms, which is translating obviously over to school board decisions, including here in the city. So that's forcing school board members to have to make some difficult decisions that have become extremely controversial. Recently, our school board had to vote on a transgender policy. That was part of our governor's plan. How would you have voted on that?
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of the policy, so to say how I would have voted on it, and I'm not trying to dodge your question, I'm just honestly, this is how I think. I mean, I would have to look at the policy in depth.
The basics, as I understand, were to keep born males at birth out of girls' bathrooms and out of girls' changing rooms. So if there is a at birth born male, he would have to use a separate bathroom or a separate changing room. And that was the base, I mean, the very basic gist of it. And that is what our school board voted to support.
Right. On that issue, so if that were the issue, I mean, I would support folks of whatever their biology is, that's the restroom they use. If accommodations have to be made because of gender issues, then it would be a separate facility of some sort. That's how I would look at an issue like that particular issue. I don't know the whole policy,
Sure.
but
Sure.
Yeah.
Just giving thought into the fact that, like I said, a lot of issues that have been not really education issues
Right.
are now becoming school board issues
I
that have to be
understand, yeah.
considered, and people are being put in that position. And it's something to consider when you're
Sure.
considering being on the board and knowing that those things will be asked of you, and with your resume and pastor being on there, people are looking at that and considering that.
Well, and you know, I'm going to vote on issues the way my conscience leads me. But at the same time, while doing so, as I've mentioned, I think it was Councilman Taylor's question, or maybe it was for all these, but you know, I'm going to look at the other side. I'm going to listen to them. You know, when I go into a room, sit down at a table with folks, I may have in my, I surely will have in my head what I want to do at that point, what I think is the right answer, as it were. However, I have an ability over years of experience to sit back, kind of turn that off, and listen to what other people are saying, hear their sides, take notes, and then weigh those sides in my decision making. So in any issue, that's what I vow to you all and to the citizens of Lynchburg to do is, yes, you know, people say, well, I'm not a presuppositionalist. Everybody's a presuppositionalist. Like, we all come to the table with our ideas, things that we value systems, things that we are committed to. You can't help that. That's human nature. However, what we can do is choose, using our will, to listen to the other side, to hear the logical arguments, and to weigh that evidence.
Sure.
I mean, you know, this is what our legal profession does, right? This is what we hope that they do. It's what we hope. It's why we place judges on the bench to be impartial, right? We hope our Supreme Court is doing this when they hear cases, is turning off their own presuppositions, listening to the evidence, and making equitable due process decisions based on that. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dr. Wilder?
Yes, again, thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. Sure. Kind of touching on the mayor's question, I've served on the school board for 9 years and city council for 8 years, and I've seen over time the relationship between the city council and school has really been challenging, more so now than ever. What will you bring to the table to bring more unity back to that situation?
So one of the things that I've had an uncanny, and I think it's just part of my personality. I don't think I've never necessarily been intentional about this, but one of the things that I've been able to do in the pastoral ministries that I've stepped into is be very much a peacemaker. Church I'm serving right now, been able to come in and, you know, kind of quell the storm, settle things down a little bit. I think because of what I've been describing, the ability to sit down, to think through issues, to be empathetic, and those types of things. I don't approach life adversarially. I don't think that's productive. I approach it again as a team effort, and that would be my approach here with city council, fellow board members, citizens, school leaders. And I've learned this through military service. I don't really care what someone's social ideologies are or their political affiliations. I can still have a conversation with anyone. I can work with anyone. We can have cordial relationship. I can have a cordial relationship with anyone, and we can work through problems together. We may come out on different sides of the issue, and that's okay. That's part of the process, right? However, we don't have to be enemies. I think about the Tip O'Neill-Ronald Reagan relationship. They would go, you know, you all are around, they would go at it in Congress, they would go at it politically, but then go out and have lunch together because they respected one another and they listened to one another. That's what I want to do. I want to have relationships, positive relationships with all that I work with. Will that happen? Unlikely, right? You're always going to have conflict with someone and unresolved issues. I mean, I get that. It's reality. It's life. However, my goal is to be a peacemaker, a team player,
Great.
someone people want to work with, right?
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Dolan?
You've given us a great window into the inside of you. I think it's great. I'd like to ask you what your main priorities would be for LCS, for our district.
Just to take a look at what we're doing now and ensure that that is focused on education, education, education. I think so many times in various organizations, corporate world, military, education, we oftentimes don't make the main thing the main thing. We get sidetracked by political, social issues and things of that nature. And it's okay to deal with those things. We have to. It's the world we live in. However, sometimes we so focus on these things that we forget that we're in the business as a Lynchburg City school system of educating our children, getting them jobs when they graduate, moving them on to their dreams. And I would want to take a very hard look, and this is why I would want to go out and talk to principals and the superintendent and the staffs and fellow school board members, you all, and find out where are the real problems, what are the major issues, so that we can start, if need be, to steer that ship back to the center line of our primary mission, to educate, educate, educate. And so that would be my principal mission. That's what I would do. I mean, I would have it in my mind that if appointed to this position, one of the first things I'm going to do is go out and start visiting principals, superintendent, have meetings, talk to people, get to know what's going on out there. Because sitting back and waiting is not going to help solve any issues. Got to get out there, jump in with both feet, as it were, and start swimming.
Thank you.
Councilman Hollister?
Just be real quick. I appreciate your comments about maturation and the Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. When you were saying that, I think about when I first got on council a long time ago, I was young, and me and Mike Gillette would fight like cats and dogs. And now we're really good friends. I mean, that's because we listen to one another. We understand what you had mentioned about the empathy, and so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councilman Missions?
That was a really great way to define mission creep without saying mission creep a minute ago. And I appreciate that, because I do think that we need to keep the main thing, right? We need to focus on what really is the goal,
Right.
to educate these kids and have them become productive citizens and part of our workforce, right? And I believe that we should be doing everything we can to support our private sector partners, right? And to reduce the burden on them. And if there's ways that we can do that with the school division, we should absolutely do it.
We have so many opportunities in Lynchburg.
Absolutely.
With higher education, with the businesses here. I mean, the sky's the limit, really.
So I guess the kind of follow-up question on all that is, how do you plan to cut through the fog? Because it seems like there's a lot, right? It seems like there is, we've heard other people this morning and questions and discussion about communication. How do you plan to cut through the fog if you're being presented with X, but your gut tells you it's Y, and they're trying to keep you from getting to determine either one in the administration building?
You got to find your partners. In any organization, especially as large as the Lynchburg City School System, as large as the administrative leadership is, there will be folks that you can talk to, folks that will cut through that tape, as it were. I think you said fire.
Yeah, cut through the fog. Like cut through the fog.
Okay.
Like cut through the fog.
Yeah,
They're trying.
there will be people. It'll take some time, but you build those relationships. And I'm not saying you create, us versus them relationships at all. But in any organization, there are people that'll give you the skinny and people that won't. And you'll learn who the people are that'll tell you the truth and cut through the fog with you and for you. And you go to those folks and you talk to them if they prove to be trustworthy. It's a complex thing, isn't it? I mean, not only got to find the people that are willing to cut through the fog, but you also got to find that they're trustworthy, and that whittles your group down to a certain extent. But my goal would be to talk to everyone, right? Those that want to talk and those that want to create fog, and those that want to. I'm not going to exclude anyone from the conversation. Would be the goal, unless they exclude themselves from it. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Totally answered my question. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
No, I exhausted mine. But one thing,
Yes, sir.
you keep talking about higher education. What would you do to get our kids involved in skills at an earlier age?
Well, I do believe that Lynchburg needs a more robust vocational program, of some sort. I don't know what that answer would be at this point, but I do think looking into more skills-based training at the high school level. I know I grew up in the Augusta County public school system, and we had a huge vocational program. And I don't know how it is now in the Augusta County school system, but I mean, so many of my classmates, the majority of my classmates, went to Valley Vocational Technical Center and gained skills, and many of them are living in huge homes and driving Mercedes-Benz now because they got into HVAC or something, and now they're very lucrative careers. I want that kind of opportunity for our students here. Again, I do believe that I love your question, thank you, but I do still think that involves partnerships. I don't think the Lynchburg City School System is going to do all that on its own, but again, thinking outside the box and looking for ways to have those direct vocational relationships, pipelines. How can we start students in their freshman year in high school, move them through so that when they graduate senior year, they're moved into maybe immediately into a job because they've gone through vocational training. But I do think that would need to involve beefing up the vocational training here in the Lynchburg City School System. But I don't know all the ins and outs of that, so I'd have to do my fact finding on that to figure out where those problems lie and where the solutions might be.
Skills are very important.
Very important.
I remember when I was sixth grade over in Albemarle County, we had woodworking shop. And Mr. Taylor, I remember, he taught us boys how to start using saws and reading rulers. And right now you have kids that's graduating high school that cannot read a ruler.
Yeah.
You bring them to the job site and say, well, mark this board and cut it. And they say, well, what is this mark on the ruler? They need to be trained early.
Right.
Sixth grade, you give the kids 4 hours of academics and 4 hours of shop, 3 hours of shop. When they graduate, they have legs to stand on, either college or skills, go into the workforce.
And I think to teach some of those basic skills, you could integrate into a high school without a ton of resources. I mean, basic measuring skills, those types of things, could be integrated in creatively into curriculum that you already have going, math classes and things of that nature. So I think so often we enter problems thinking with only a finite number of equations to solve those problems. I think we need to look at any issues as theoretical physicists, right? Because the theoretical physicists like Albert Einstein and Degrassi and those folks, right? They kind of take the equations and they throw them out the door and they walk in to solve the problem and they get creative and they create their own equations, right? They think outside, again, thinking outside the box creatively. I think if we approach any of the problems, including vocational education, and say, well, these are the tools we've got to build a huge vocational technical center. It's the only way you can do it. Okay, well, that's probably not going to happen, right? No. So then we shut it down. It doesn't happen, and our students 10 years later are still suffering from the same problems. However, if we're theoretical physicists, as it were, and we step in and go, let's not worry about the equations that have worked in the past. Let's look at this problem with new eyes, and let's create our own equations. Then we have an opportunity to solve the problem. And again, I think you can do some pretty simple things to drive at some of the problems you just identified. I could take a math class and integrate rulers and tape measurers into it, right? And figure out, for example, I had a geometry teacher. This was very innovative, a geometry teacher when I was in high school. And what we had to do for one of our projects was build something geometrical. So I built a flower pot, right? All the angles and had to cut the wood and everything. And so in doing that, what did he do? Taught me how to measure, taught me how to cut, taught me how to do basic construction, et cetera, et cetera. So I think doing things like that could drive at some of those particular problems you just addressed. But Got to think outside the box, yeah.
Well, we have reached our limit,
Oh,
so
okay.
thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
We very much appreciate it. Thank you to your family for coming today as well, and thank you for your service, sir.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day. Mr. Connor, you are up next.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Connor begins District 1 for us.
Okay. Great.
Good morning, Madam Mayor.
Good morning.
Vice Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Daryl Connor, and I am interviewing for a position, District 1 School Board.
Would you like to take a minute and say why you would like to be considered for this position?
It's my passion. My passion is, one of the things I've learned is Lynchburg has one of the highest poverty rates in the state. Even though we have some of the industries like the nuclear industries, we still have a very high poverty rate, and there is a division between levels of learning. So my passion is to see our school system begin to teach employment maturity. Many times our students graduate from high school and they're not ready for college or employment. They're just not mature enough, and that's my passion, to see them become more mature in those areas.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We'll start off with questions from Dr. Wilder.
Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate you willing to serve on our school board. And thank you for your service on working in our school system. Yes, thank you for that. Question, Lynchburg has so many programs, a plethora of programs for learning loss, achievement gap, acceleration programs, community college programs, things of that nature. And we still have some challenges with achievement gap, as well as some challenges with our test scores. What programs do you really like in our school system, and what would you suggest they need to do to address some of that learning loss or some of the achievement gap situations of the low test scores?
Okay, from my familiarity with some of those programs, I'm just going to be transparent and real. I was the person that routed buses that picked up students and took them to the early college program or took them to the CTE programs. And we were picking up the children from areas where the support is there. And we were picking up less children from areas where support is not there in the home and in the community. And that's part of the reason for the achievement gap. And one of the things I think we need to do as a school system is to recruit and encourage the portion of students who are not participating in some of these alternate programs, and encouraging them and drawing them, getting more of them involved. Many times they feel marginalized and don't feel like they are really reached out to. So I think somehow we need to encourage them to participate in early college or CTE, so that we're picking up students and taking them to CVCC from all parts of the city and not just certain parts of the city.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your willingness to serve. Excuse me, allergies. What would your priorities be for LCS the first 3-4 years of service?
Well, my first priority would be to get in, to make sure, I don't want to come in with tunnel vision from my experience in the system. I would come into the school board with an open mind to see it from that perspective. I've never looked at education from the perspective of a school board. And the first thing I would try to do is acclimate myself to how the school board operates and how the school board cooperates with the city council, how the school board cooperates with administrators. The principals, the school administrators have a different perspective. And I think that we all need to be champions for teachers, because that's the front line for learning. But we also need to be aware and cognizant of each level of employee, because for a school system to be successful, every level, food service, security, that's got to be a big priority. Security, food service, transportation, as well as the academic side, all working together fluidly with the priority of educating the children.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Hutchinson?
Good morning.
Good
You know,
morning.
You just said that all those items work together, and, you know, transportation is how you get there. About a year ago, I know you retired. You served 14 years at the LCS, and you retired a few years ago as the transportation manager.
After COVID,
Yeah. So about a year or so ago, I was with Dr. Gupta at Heritage Elementary School. We're welcoming students. As the students came, they came over about an hour and a half period of time. A bus would come drop off some kids. A little bit later, a bus would come drop off some more kids. I'm flabbergasted at seeing this because, as you mentioned, it's you know, a cohesive group. If you can't get the students there on time when school starts, and a group comes in about an hour or hour and a half later, how can you have a classroom? So I've seen how things have changed. I mean, I've never seen that. Normally, kids would come in all at the same time, not over an hour and a half period. What's happened, and how can we improve that to get them there on time so it's not disrupting the teacher and has to, oh, by the way, new kids came by, here's what I reviewed before.
it's even worse in the afternoons
Yeah.
because many of the children in some of the faraway neighborhoods have to wait. So they have them in the cafeteria, in the foyer, and they've already been in school all day. Their energy is overwhelming. So by the time they get on the bus, it's real dangerous and frustrating for the driver to deal with that same situation. Some of our zones were created 50 years ago.
Yep.
Things have changed in 50 years. And one of the reasons for the zones the way they were established was really an economic problem. Funds were not provided equally throughout the school system. You know, it was separate but equal, but it really wasn't. And I think some of those challenges have been addressed and can continue to be addressed if we make sure that every school is equally funded, gets the same materials, everybody's up to date, everybody is allowed the same level of learning. We might be able to bring children closer to home so they're not an hour later than the other children. There are schools, some our kids are being pulled from neighborhoods that go to Sandusky that are 16th, 7th Street in the Presidents. Some children are pulled from that are going to Paul Monroe or Bedford Hills all the way down below Darrington. And I understand why it was that way, but we need to look at it and get kids closer to home because those bus rides it's difficult. By the time they get to school, they've been on the bus so long, now we get them to school, we rush them into the classroom and expect them to be, ready to learn. And many times there's a period of, they rush in, hand them a oatmeal bar and shoot them into the classroom. Many of them are going into the classroom with the oatmeal bar and the carton of milk. And we need to get them closer to home, get them closer to the school so that they can have the same smooth transition from home to school day, and then from school back home.
Thank
And
you
that
very
needs
much.
to be really looked at seriously because there are if you were to look at a zoning map for Lynchburg City Schools, you're like, why? And most of the time, there's no answer.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Mischins?
Thank you. Good to see you, Daryl. And I mean, you nailed it. I've been looking at those maps from the demographic study in 2022, and it's, it's a heat map over a heat map over a heat map is basically what it is. And it's unfortunate, but I appreciate your response to Councilmember Helgeson. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, what I asked earlier today. How do you feel about charter schools?
About
Charter schools.
charter schools. I believe if charter schools are put together in cooperation with the school system, I think they can be a benefit. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Everybody knows that Michelle Obama went to a charter school. I went to a school called Chicago Vocational School, which was a CVS, Chicago Vocational School, which was a school that focused on trades. We had auto shop, wood shop, clerical, it was really focused on, and they kind of got away from that. I understand it's not even a vocational school anymore. So charter schools, if they're working in cooperation with, I believe, the school system, I believe can have some benefits. And it can't just be like your Fort Hills or your Rivermont school. We need to have alternatives because every child does not learn the same way. And I believe if we had charter schools with a focused mission that supplemented what the school system does, I think there could be a benefit. Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Discipline. You've been in the schools.
That's all I need to say, right?
That is, to me, that is probably one of the most difficult challenges. How do you provide discipline fairly, equitably, and effectively, and in a balanced type of way? That, to me, that's a problem that just can't be answered. And me sitting here and tell you I know everything about it, I know that's one of the most challenging things in not just our school system, but any school system. This generation is different. The children are different. The young parents that are parenting these children are different. And we have to, I don't know the answer, but I know that we have to think outside the box. We have to come up with innovative ways to help these children, especially those with behavioral problems, to reacclimate them into a learning environment. But that's, to me, one of the most difficult challenges we face. And I'll be honest, I don't have the answer, but I believe I can be suggestive and cooperative with a group effort in coming up with some solutions. And we will need to get parents involved.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Crowley?
What's the greatest security threat to Lynchburg City Schools?
Well,
I'm sorry, not security threat,
to
threat in general.
well, to any school system, we don't know those that are suffering with mental and emotional disabilities that are in our community. We never know where it's going to come from, how it's going to come. And I think our schools need to be, I'll use the word hardened. They need to be hard targets. They need to have adequate camera systems. They need to have especially adequate door locking systems. Blind spots need to be identified, and I believe every school should have a designated security person. Somehow we need to have in the budget not one resource officer covering 4 schools over 5-6 miles. So if something happens at this school, that security, each school, I believe, should have, and we should find a way to have a resource officer in every school, from elementary through high school.
What about threats in general, not necessarily security? I misphrased my question. I've been asking everybody.
Well, threats in general, well, we know that social media is an issue, that social media needs to be monitored and look and monitor for threats. I think that, like the situation that happened in Heritage High School, we need to have a way to deal with, in-school violence. Teachers need to be trained, and there need to be a faster response to those type of situations. But once again, like discipline, it's a bigger, security is an issue that needs to be encompassing. It needs to have, we need to look at, okay, what's our camera system look like? What's our staffing look like? And we need all these different pieces to work together. Really, the main focus is the safety of the children.
So you were in here when I asked my previous question. So we know that school boards have now had to take on a lot of political decisions, decision-making. We've seen it all over the country. We've seen it here in Lynchburg. We've seen, politics in the classrooms where really, as we said earlier, education is the primary function, obviously, of our schools. It should be all that we're talking about, everything that we're pushing. The jobs of the schools are to educate. But unfortunately, in today's climate, we're seeing politics kind of becoming more of the issues we're dealing with in the school systems, or a lot of the times. And so our school board has had to make this last year some political decisions, or certainly had a lot of political decisions to weigh. Just recently, they had to vote on the governor's transgender policy, which was, the basics of it was whether naturally born males who are identifying as transgender should be allowed to use girls' restrooms and girls' changing rooms. And the school board voted that if you are a natural born male, regardless if you're identifying as transgender, that you should not be allowed to use a female restroom or a female changing room, that you would need to use the bathroom of your designated gender at birth, or a separate bathroom or changing room to protect the privacy of young women. How would you have voted on that?
I would have voted that you are to use the bathroom that is according to your sex identity at birth. Now, as far as additional facilities, I understand in our culture there is a lot of going back and forth with gender identity. If they're going to look at a third option, then that would be something that would be discussed. But I believe as far as boys' bathrooms, girls' bathrooms, boys' locker room, girls' locker rooms, boys' teams, girls' teams should be the gender assigned at birth.
Thank you. So you're comfortable being put in the position of having to make some of these difficult political types of decisions when it comes down to, again, as a school board, it really should be making more academic and education-focused decisions, understanding in the world that we're in right now, that you'll be put in the position to make what really end up being more social political decisions, and you understand that that will be part of the job.
As long as we don't discriminate arbitrarily against any person for any reason, like religion, race, the gender identity situation that's bigger than Lynchburg City School Board, Lynchburg City Council, state government. It is, it is a big issue. And I think that the Lynchburg City School Board needs to simplify and do what they think is right for the Lynchburg City school student, and at the same time make sure that all students are treated fairly. One of the other things I know was that children have requested to use pronouns, and one of the things I believe our governor insists is that the parent be involved, where some school systems wanted it to be able to be done at the school without the parents' involvement. And I think one thing that we need to do as a school board is make sure that we have parental involvement. The more we can pull them in, our PTOs should be packed. And I know sometimes you go to PTO meeting, there's 4 parents there and there's 300 kids in the school. So I think one of the things that the school board needs to do is encourage parents to be more involved. It's going to take work to do that, but I believe that in those parents that do have children that are having gender dysphoria, gender issues, we need to work with the parents and find out what's the best way to make sure that that child is treated fairly and evenly, and protecting the other children as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. Dr. Wilder?
Thank you again for coming in today. We really appreciate it. I've served in the school board for 8 years and city council for 9 years. I'm city council for 8 years, and I've seen over time the challenges in serving on the relationship between the school board and the city council, and now it's gotten a little more challenging. What would you bring to the table to bring that unity together?
Well, we just got to work together. I mean, the school board can't be effective without the support of the city council. The school system can't be effective without the support of the school board. And to me, our relationship should not be adversarial because we may disagree. I mean, the school board says, hey, we need $84 million, but there's only $74 million available. We need to somehow work together to figure out how to make that work without becoming adversaries. The school board and the city council shouldn't be adversarial toward one another. They should be cooperative. How I would do it is I would try to find a way to be on the side. I'm a centrist, and I try to be in a position where I try to look at both sides of the issue, because usually there's some right and some wrong in every side of an issue, but we need to come together and work together without, I might not be, I don't know all the big words, but we need to just be a cooperative body. And when, just like in any type of relationship, sometimes when things get heated, that's the time to step back. Let's take a 15-minute, everybody go get a glass of water and come back, and let's, come back to the table with level and even keeled emotions. People are emotional, and sometimes we have to hey, let's take a break, and then come back, and then let's revisit the issue with calm, non-emotional responses.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you. Could you articulate your understanding of the role of a school board member?
Well, I understand that we are vital in assisting with school administration and functions such as budgeting, looking at the financial aspects. I understand that when necessary, we are involved in the supervision and choosing of our superintendent and the support for that superintendent. And I understand that we look at big picture issues like capital improvement of our schools and projects. So I think that we are a oversight board that is there to assist and encourage. And like I say, we should be champions for our teachers. That's the academic front line. And we should be champions for our district as a whole, especially for the children and the parents.
Thank you.
Councilman Hudson?
No other questions, so since you guys haven't been able to ask 2 questions, I'd acquiesce. Thank you.
Can I share something? Because your question earlier, I was in when you interviewed. I am also a certified instructor for NCCER Core. You're familiar with that? And I teach I teach class, so I understand trades. And one of the most frustrating things I had, and I've put through several classes in the last few years, is 6th grade math. Reading a ruler is 6th grade math. You got to understand fractions and decimals. That's right. And that was, sometime I had to spend, the book, the NCER book would say spend 1 week or so many, 4 hours on ruler. Sometimes we'd have to spend 3 weeks getting through the ruler. So one of the things we have to make, and I think the thing is we have to make math at that level, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, it's got to be fun. It can't be just rudimentary A, B, C, you better know how to do this. We got to somehow come up with educational ways to make math fun for kids to, like you say, if a ruler's involved or what can be involved, bring a pie into the room, and okay, we got 12 students, how many pieces of pie, just make it, because math is the thing, the 2 things that I believe students need is to know how to read and math.
Yes.
At a rudimentary level. If you can read, you can do anything. And I understand that some of our students, especially in our alternative schools, have a real difficult time reading. Yes. And I think we need to get also at we're addressing it sometimes at the middle school level, but I think at the high school level, we need to zero in on those students that are struggling with reading and come up with comprehensive ways to instill in them how to read and how important reading is. So I just thought I'd share that.
So It's to my understanding that some parents drop the kids off at school, and the kids got to be detoxed before they can go in the classroom because the parents have been smoking pot in front of them. Is it any way, the plan that you could come up with to stop the parents from bringing the kids to the schools high early in the morning?
Sorry, I wish I could, sorry.
You know, do you
One
think?
of the, that's, you know, that was a dangerous thing when we decriminalized marijuana. That's one of the negative effects gonna be. I don't have an answer, but I would be willing to work with, you know, a committee or something to see what we could do. How we
Yes.
would address it, I don't know. It's a very serious situation though.
And that affect the learning ability of children?
Yes, because they have a contact, especially if they're smoking it in the car.
Yes.
And the children have a mild, you know, they just have a, you know, it's called a contact high. And the children, it's gonna take them an hour or so to even, to where they can comprehend that at the right level. That's a serious, serious situation.
Yes.
That's gonna need to be addressed at a higher level than just in this interview.
Yes.
I wish I had a,
Yes.
you know, I could wave a magic wand, but that is a serious issue.
It's something to think about.
Yep.
Thank you, Brett.
You have 2 minutes left. Your biggest, because I know that with the work that you do between being a pastor and the work you do for helping get jobs for our young people, in the 1 minute we have left now, your biggest concern for the youth in Lynchburg?
Is teaching them employment maturity. Somehow, and we need to integrate into our classes. I understand that children that are participating in, let's say, Beacon of Hope, they're learning checkbook and how to balance, and they're learning banking, but it needs to spread out beyond that. It needs, somehow we need to reach the marginalized students and teach them employment maturity, where they can walk in, they can graduate from high school, learn a trade, go to college, where they're at a certain level of maturity. And one of the things we have to instill, to train them in maturity, in the basics of getting to work on time. One of the frustrating things I thought too is growing up in Chicago is there were no school buses unless you were in a wheelchair. We either walked to school or we had to catch public transportation. And I think one of the things that kind of handicaps our students sometimes is the door-to-door service that we provide, which we have to because of the way our city's spread out. But in that, we also need to teach them more how to become more responsible and accountable for their own participation in education.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.
All right, thank you.
Okay, with that, y'all, we will recess until 12 o'clock, right? Yeah? Or, no? Yeah, okay. Welcome back to the special called meeting of Lynchburg City Council for the purpose of conducting interviews for the school board. Ms. Finney, please call our next candidate, but she's not in here and I've already called you, so. Mr. Patrick Earl, thank you for joining us today. We're going to give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be selected for school board.
Absolutely. My name is Patrick Earl. I've been in Lynchburg almost a decade now, and the reason I think I can help on the school board is that I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference for my son who attends school, my daughter who will attend LCS, and all the kids. I think I'm especially suited for this for a number of reasons. Almost a decade now I've worked in higher education. But not just higher education, I've helped run summer camps for the youth. I was recently appointed Cub Master of my son's Cub Scout pack, Pack 29. Hope they're listening. I've been a foster parent. I've even substitute taught in preschool. But most of all, I see problems and I like to fix them. And I like to fix them in a collaborative way. By trade, I'm an actor. I am a theater practitioner. It's the most collaborative art form. And so you get a bunch of smart people in a room and you solve it together.
Well, thank you so much. We'll start off with a question from Dr. Wilder.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in today. Thank you for your willingness to serve on our school board. We really appreciate you for your service. The Lynchburg school system has 15-plus programs that address learning loss or achievement gap, or also for advanced and gifted students. So some really great, amazing programs to address that. We continue to have some challenges and struggles with achievement gap as well as some about test scores. Which program do you really like the most in our school system, the special programs? And then what program do you recommend or suggest that we need to do more of to address the learning loss and also some of our challenging test scores?
Absolutely. First off, I'm not a huge test taker myself. I was always a wonderful student, just wasn't great at standardized tests. So I always take SOLs and standardized tests with a grain of salt, but I completely understand and admit that we have to set some sort of standard and some sort of benchmark that we have to hit. But the programs that I am currently very interested in is the ones that are involved with early education. I like the LCS Restore a lot, helping little ones with behavioral issues make the transitions, kindergarten to first grade, 5th to 6th, even 8th into high school. But I also like our pre-K programs. The results are in on the earlier you can get a child in education, the better. Expanding pre-K, I think, is almost essential. They're waiting. I know there's discussions about doing it. It's certainly gotten better over the last few years, but there's still wait lists. As much as we can expand early learning, I think is the best. And I think this is the long game, obviously, but the higher leg up that we can get those youths eventually, once they start taking the SOLs in 3rd grade, it might be the long game, but I feel like those tests will go up. I think that's it. Did you get all you needed?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Earl, for your willingness to serve. In your introductory remarks, you stated that you want to serve because you want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what that looks like to you. How would you make a difference?
Absolutely. I am big into problem solving, like I just said, through the collaborative effort. I know I'll probably repeat this a number of times. I know just listening outside to some of the previous candidates, you've probably heard this before, but I feel as if there is a trust issue between various parts of the city. Administration to teachers, school board to the administration, even city council to the school board. It's before we can even collaborate, we need to build a sense of trust. And I think the difference that I can make is that I do listen. I change my mind on a minute-to-minute basis, and it's based on all the facts and stimuli that I am getting and making informed decisions about. And I think the more like-minded folk that we can get on the school board that are willing to listen to the experts, yes, of course, listen to your gut, listen to your heart, make decisions based on your beliefs and whatnot, but letting yourself be informed by experts and data and the truth, I think that would solve a lot of what is going on.
Thank you. Captain Hudson?
As continuing on your line of thoughts about truth.
Yeah.
And your experience as an actor. So, and you've taught acting and you've acted, and you've done that for a long time.
Yeah.
So hopefully, maybe if you're on the school board as a really good actor, can you tell when another really good actor is telling the truth using rhetoric or reality? How do you tell the difference? Can you sift through that?
Oh goodness.
We're getting you right.
Yeah, no, that's
in your
great.
acting.
No, it's the simple answer, yes, I can. Shakespeare is my predominant means of acting, and you study the rhetoric and you study what rhetoric works, people talking around subjects, but I also feel like not necessarily using truth as a weapon, but overt honesty, I think, is the best course of action. And you're not necessarily calling someone out on that. You can use compassion. You can use politeness rather than politics to call people out. Just be like, I don't necessarily get the same. How about, for instance, if someone's saying something that doesn't seem correct to you, you can say something like, hey, I'm not coming to the same conclusion as you are given the information that we have. Can you help me understand where you're coming from? That will usually give them time to either backpedal or come up with something that maybe teaches you something. But getting to the truth of the matter is essential. And I don't think we need to, get heated to do so.
And you can use Macbeth to say,
I can't
I wonder why he
it's-
protests too much.
I was like, yeah, don't. It's unlucky to quote Macbeth, just so you know.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a
oops.
theater thing. I don't believe in it. It's
Yeah,
a bunch
good.
of hullabaloo, but yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilman Mischins?
How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing well, you?
Good to see you. Thanks for coming. You mentioned early childhood education.
Yeah.
Expanding early childhood education.
Yes. Yeah.
How are we going to pay for it?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to take a deep dive into the budget, obviously, and these are things that, transparency, getting hands on things. I consider myself a very fiscally responsible person. Hopefully it can be done without like slashing or cutting or like I know you all are not proponents of raising taxes. Of course not. But finding an economical means, even if it's just spending a little bit more. Like I said, I'm not the expert on the budget. I don't know where there's fat to cut at all. But in my opinion, if we're going to find something worth investing in, it would be that. That didn't answer your question. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the budget, but
Yeah, I mean-
finding, and that's something we would need to put our heads together about and figure out. But yeah, absolutely.
It's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Taylor?
Yes, how you doing, Patrick?
I'm doing well, you?
All is well. Knowing the memory loss that children had, well, learning loss, I said memory loss, learning loss that
I'm
children
suffering from that
had, had during the COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
What would you do different if another crisis arises?
Another crisis arises. Oh goodness. Well, I have a couple answers to that. Number one, it's a tragedy that our students have suffered that, and we're struggling to catch them up. But I think we need to take a collective sigh as a society and realize what we all just went through. Right? There's a couple million people from our fellow citizens are just gone. And we need to recognize that it's not necessarily something that us as a school system can solve completely, because bad habits were learned while folks were at home. Some cases necessary, in some cases maybe they should have been at school a little earlier. But we need to double down on the fact that we went through something. How can we provide a means of support in that way? I think one cool thing that came out of the pandemic was students that find it better for themselves to learn remotely can still do that. But as far as making up those gaps, I mean, it's a matter of those peripheral programs. Folks that need help, folks that are, or students that are, consistently testing low on something. And those are the ones that need to be either brought out of class, maybe given some tutoring, but also getting the parents involved, because the school system can only do so much without the parent support.
Would you agree to a shutdown or continue to leave schools open?
Oh, that's on a case-to-case basis. I would say in the case of COVID, if we went through it, absolutely, I would agree to it. Coming out of the shutdown, when to do it, I couldn't tell you. But absolutely, yeah. And it's not just for, it's not, and that's when making tough decisions like that is hard and it's political, which is sad. But in the case of schools, it's not just protecting the kids, it's protecting their parents, it's protecting their grandparents, because kids, could have come out of that just fine. Some got sick, some got really sick. But sometimes, they were carriers, and that's sad to think about. But if we're sending these kids to school, to school, and passing that along to someone in their family that, is immunocompromised or is simply elderly, that's a sad thing. That's a sad thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vice Mayor Feraldi.
No questions.
So I think you were in here when I asked my previous question. I'll change it up a tad bit. So as you know, the school boards around the country have become very political. I mean, a lot of the decisions that they're faced with, a lot of parents that come into school board meetings are extremely angry at times, passionate. Some have become violent in their positions on things. The schools are charged with educating our children. That should be the primary focus of all schools. And really should be the only thing that I think school board members should have to really be considering are
Yes.
academic decisions.
Yeah.
And working with the administrators and all the decisions that they're making. However, that is not the world that we currently are living in. So you're having to make political decisions. There's a lot of politics in classrooms. Are you, knowing that if you were on the school board, knowing that there will be political decisions that you'll be having to make, like our school board has currently had to make this past year, if faced with the decision, if the school board had the ability to make the decision to make a policy that unless you are a government class, okay? So unless you're a government class where you're actually teaching politics, so political science, AP government, where politics should actually be discussed, okay? Would you support making a policy, let's say, that said, no politics are allowed to be discussed, no political issues, social issues are allowed to be discussed in any classroom, K through 12, outside of those specific classrooms, to avoid, for the purpose of some of the fallout that we're facing in the city. For example, we get emails as council members. I know the school board members get emails from parents. My fourth grade English, my child in fourth grade English class, their teacher talked about the current president or the former president, and a horrible thing was said about him. Why is that president being slurred in my fourth grade English class? Or by my teacher, my son or daughter's teacher? Why are they talking about a president, or why are they talking about transgenderism or talking about a political social issue in science class or English class or math class. There's a flag in my daughter's science class that has a very political or social representation in it, or in a certain school that they're upset about on either side of the aisle.
Yeah.
So let's say you were charged with voting on something like that in the school board. How would you feel about that?
Well,
Personally,
I would first, I'd take a sip of water, swallow real hard.
Yeah.
No, that's a,
I mean,
that's a multi-layered
it is,
question.
but to get us back to
yeah,
your
absolutely.
primary focus of making education the focus of schools, if that were something that were to come up, what were your thoughts on that?
I don't think I would. And here's why. It's a very, very slippery slope. Most of our, let's take English for example, most of our American classics are comments on what was happening politically during that time, right? Also, what should be considered a healthcare issue and could be taught in a science class, mechanics of it, the benefits of it, downsides of it, can also be seen as a political view on one side of the aisle. And the same thing goes for the other one. If you're talking about world events right now, I'm not going to get into that. But the minute you start talking about groups of people or rights of the body, and I don't mean by that like which is right and which is wrong. What I'm saying is the minute you start politicizing things that aren't necessarily political, then we get into micromanagement of content in the classroom. Now, what you were talking about as far as saying terrible things about politicians, I'm like, I make sure to tell my son if he hears something on the radio, like they're different than us. Obviously, you might not believe the same way I do. You're too young to form your own opinion. Eventually you will. But we can't say those things. We also don't want to indoctrinate our children until they're well informed enough to make their own decisions, right? So I'll concede to the point that I think is inappropriate. The risk factor of that, I don't think outweighs it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think, again, kind of the point I was making with previous candidates was just, understanding that, again, you're going to be put in a position to
Absolutely, yeah.
have to discuss and consider political decisions that are very on the forefront kind of nationally, and that those are decisions that you'll have to consider. And it has brought, our chamber has been packed with people that are very, I say passionate.
I have seen.
And vocal,
I've seen.
but you're, so have the school board. The room has been packed over there as well. So to understand that those are things you'll be considering, and just to be prepared for that and
Thank
aware
you.
of those things. I know you are, but just,
Thank you.
yeah, so. Okay, Dr. Wilder.
Yes, again, thank you for your willingness to come in today. Really appreciate it. And just serving on the school board is a challenging role. I've served in it for 9 years. And I've seen so many sides, especially with decisions like the COVID situation. I'm dealing with a case right now where a young man in one of the counties, he brought home COVID from his class and gave it to his father. And his father died. And he is right now being institutionalized because of the fact that he gave violence that killed his father. So that's such a challenging issue for a 12, 13-year-old kid to deal with. So again, looking at that and looking at the school board and city council relationships over the years, I've seen it just be somewhat challenging, more so now lately. What would you bring to the table to bring more unity to that conversation?
I would say just listening. Like I said, if a person can't trust you if you don't listen, communicating, also listening to the experts. I think a school board should be a group of well-rounded individuals. It's great to have educational experts on there, right? It's great to have people that are financial experts in budgets, but it also should be a representative of the community itself. And by doing so, it's not necessarily a policing of the experts, but more keeping them honest. And I think I can bring that to the table as, hey, let's listen to the experts. Let's see what can be done better. But most of all, listen to everyone around us. Because I mean, my wife will always say this. She's like, whenever I'm in the room, I never want to be the smartest one, because that's not how good theater gets made, right? And I believe that to be true. So I feel like no one's going to come up with the right answer by themselves. But what I think I can bring to the table is, marshaling a group of folk that can listen and actually listen and put the children first rather than, maybe what they're about to do at the ballot box the next week.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you. There's just immense challenges facing school boards all over today. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing our local school board?
Politics. And it's so hard. And it's not just the school board. It's our everyday lives. It's what we listen to on the radio. It's what we watch in the news. But at the end of the day, what we're there for is educating our children. And I truly believe if everyone put that first, I think a lot of those challenges would go away. Secondarily, just, economy. It's tough right now. It's a tough world. Everything's more expensive. That puts pressure on the families, which puts pressure on, the behavior of the children. Stress in an environment where one is supposed to be learning is anathema. So any kind of stressor that people are receiving from the outside, and that goes for not just the students, but the teachers as well. If they're stressed out, they're not going to succeed in teaching our children, right? But it's tough out there, and I think that's also a big factor that we're feeling.
Thank you.
Councilman Hudson?
I think of the stress that my dad and mom went through during World War II, where he left from a farm and went overseas in the Pacific and had to serve in a bomber. I look at just coming out of the Great Depression, and so we're always having stress.
Yeah.
How, as a board member, could you help push the schools into a better direction to maybe help alleviate some of that stress, or understanding that stress and how to cope with that stress?
Absolutely. And this, like I said, I'm going to preface this with, I'm not an expert on that budget. So as far as like cutting here or investing there, I can't comment to that right now. But a lot of it is we cannot help with, because we would need to be able to help the families. As a school board, we can't give them money, right? We can't help with the rent. We can't help with the mortgage. We can't help with the car payments. But there's only I'll say this, there's only 7 or 8 social workers for the 7,000 odd students that we have. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. So those individual families that might need help, that might need intervention, that may be like, hey, go over to Human Services. Maybe this family needs their attention right now. Some people might be falling through the cracks, just because some of the staff, some of the teachers are being stretched too far and or being asked to do more than they should be asked to do.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So, several times you've mentioned kind of relying on the experts, listening to the experts, right? Well, we're learning things now that we didn't know 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Recently, in a select subcommittee hearing on the coronavirus pandemic at the Capitol, Fauci admitted under oath, Dr. Fauci, that he didn't review any specific scientific data for masking children. So when we're talking about listening to experts, how do we know who those experts are when we're seeing evidence every day that the people that society revered as experts were flat out wrong?
I guess you'd have to take that on a case-by-case basis. I I do have a science degree, but I'm not a microbiologist or a health expert. But I can't answer to the Fauci thing. But, you know, as an executive director of a nonprofit, you hire people and then you trust them to do their job until they don't do it well, right? You always listen with compassion. You always, for lack of a better term, reprimand with compassion. But they need to do their job, right? So as far as listening to the experts, the right people have to be in the right positions. But at the same time, we can't listen with an ear only to the things that we want to hear. Sometimes I have to change my mind because even though I don't want to, I mean, every day I'm like, oh, that's not the right choice for, even if it's just a play, I'm like, that's not the right choice. But then after I examine it a while, I'm like, no, they're right. They're right. I didn't want to hear it, but they are right. Because whoever I hire knows more than I do. Like, I don't know how to plot an entire play, you know what I mean? I'm also not an expert in child psychology, right? So the only faith that we have to rest on is these people that we hire, right? And trust that they're the experts. And that all goes to say things take time. So if we're looking for immediate and effective results, sometimes it's a waiting game. You know what I mean? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have 3 minutes left. Councilman Taylor, do you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned preschool. What's the earliest age you think a child should be relieved of his parents and enter into preschool?
There is that's a loaded question. All right, so let's break it down. Most families now don't have the luxury to have of a stay-at-home parent, right? A stay-at-home parent. My family early on, I was a stay-at-home dad that worked part-time, and I was able to sit there, my 2-year-old, 3-year-old son, and work out his ABCs. Like, let's do it, buddy, right? When we both started working, we decided to take my 2-year-old daughter and put her in preschool, not public preschool, 2-3 days a week. She loved it. She thrived. She came back knowing stuff that I was like, wow, they taught her better than I did. I could have, because they're early education experts. I think it's a child-by-child basis. I honestly think my son would have learned better with me. My daughter she is very smart and she's very opinionated, and I think she does great at school. But I think as early as you can, without seeming like you're ripping the child out of the hands of their parent, is going to benefit them. But that young, we're not talking about an all-day thing. We're talking about like a couple hours in the morning or a couple hours a few days a week. But as far as preschool age, it's been a while. So 5 years is pre-K. 5 to 6 years is pre-K. No, that's not right. 4 to 5 years is pre-K. I think a lot of families in Lynchburg would benefit from that kind of education.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have a question? Okay, well, thank you so much, Mr. Earl. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay. Ms. Jenkins? Yes. Mm-hmm. Hello, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and in a couple minutes, just tell us why you want to run for school board, why you would like us to consider you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Elizabeth Jenkins. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Lynchburg, Virginia. I've done that for many, many years. I went to EC Glass, as did my children and my stepson. My children also went to Bedford Hills and Lincoln prior to that time. I would like to be considered for school board because I have been concerned about the things that the children come in and tell me, my clients and their parents, things that they are concerned about. And my thinking is, if it's bothering me, then why don't I try to do something to make things a little different? So in doing some more thinking about that, I looked around my neighborhood, and I live in the 400 block of Elmwood, which, if you're familiar with Rivermont, is right behind St. John's Episcopal Church. And looked up and down the street, and there are 11 children in the 400 pushing into the 500 block of Elmwood who go to private schools. And that was really a surprising number for me. They go to Compass, Onward, New Covenant, James River, and VES, and maybe a school that I don't know. There's a young man across the street who goes to public school. He's probably rising 9th grade. And there are 2 young ladies down the street who are at EC Glass. But that's an enormous number of kids for a block and a half. So I'm wondering why. What is it? Maybe perhaps a family has made a faith-based decision. Perhaps they have made other decisions. So when my kids were going to school, and even prior to that, if you drive up Elmwood, at the cross of Elmwood and Woodland, there's a bus stop. And you just knew, slow down, stop, and wait, because there were a gaggle of kids getting on those buses every morning to go to Bedford Hills, or to go to the Ghost Center, or to T.C. Miller if they were choosing an option. That's not there anymore. The bus stop is there. The children are not. So my question is, I've always thought and always had great faith in our public schools and had good experiences there. So what's different now? And is that a question we can ask? Our teachers are leaving. I think we need to ask them why they're leaving. And I think we need to ask the ones that are staying, why are you staying? What brings you here? What keeps you here? And if one parent, say in my neighborhood, and I don't know this to be true, but if one parent had a negative or a questionable experience with a teacher or a school, that gets contagious. And then it's, oh, you don't want your child at that school because. And it may have been an isolated incident. It may have not been an incident at all. But I think we need to ask some questions about why our kids aren't there.
Thank you very much. Dr. Wilder, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for coming in today and offering yourself to serve on the school board. We really
Yes, sir.
appreciate that. The school system has 15-plus programs on Achievement Gap or the Gold Center or advanced programs or career technical programs, and also some programs that address like learning loss or achievement gap. What programs are you most familiar with that you really like in our school system? And we continue to have challenges in our test scores. What do you recommend or what do you suggest needs to be done in our school system to address some of those challenging test scores?
Okay, can you repeat the part about the test scores again? I
Yes.
didn't quite
So
understand.
we continue to see some challenges in test scores.
Yes, sir.
What do you suggest we do to address that in our community?
Okay, the first part of your question, the alternative programs that I'm aware of for the achievement gaps, Fort Hill, Pride, the Restorative Center, which has just begun in the last year, I believe, for the younger children, which I think is a fabulous idea. Rodeo. I think all of them have a role and have a place if they are providing that student who is not, for whatever reason, able to, willing to, or has the means to utilize a standard public school education. I think they all have their place. The achievement gap is very concerning. And how do we address that with test scores, or how do we look at the test score gaps? I think we need to understand something more about those children who have the declining or not acceptable to standard test scores. Maybe we do, maybe we don't know. What do those children bring in with them every day? And that is where I think my information and knowledge and experience about trauma-informed intervention can be helpful. If a child sees significant dysfunction, if they have housing insecurity, food insecurity, medical insecurity, a traumatic environment, when they walk into school, they are not prepared to learn math or to take a reading SOL. They may be incredibly preoccupied with what's going to happen when they go home, if they have home, if they know where home is. So I think we have to look more at the whole child and what is that child bringing and what does that child need so they can be prepared to be an academic success.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you. I have so many questions. I was going to ask you another question, but then piggybacking on Councilmember Wilder's, this whole idea of trauma intervention. As a school board member, how do you initiate that? How do you get the resources to do that? How does that happen? I mean, it's a huge item.
As a school board member, I would envision sharing training, sharing some knowledge, sharing some experience, and not just me, but other people who have the information, with building principals, with building guidance counselors, with staff and teachers who interact on a daily basis with the children to understand what trauma means. And for children, we have to look at trauma through their eyes, not our eyes, because it can be very different. And sometimes we have to think way outside the box. Perhaps there was a horrible crisis, a shooting in the 1300 block of some street, whatever street that is. And the children have been up that night, and they've heard sirens, and they've seen lights. And then they go to bed, and then they come in the morning, and they've had a trauma that night. But they're not saying that out loud. They may not come in and say, last night in my neighborhood, there was a shooting, and there were emergency responders. But they may not be prepared to study or to learn. They may even have acting out behaviors. So I think we need to understand that when we see that on the news, that there was a shooting in the 1300 block of whatever that street is, let's look and see who those kids are. Do we have those children in our school? Let's talk to them about it. Let's make sure they had breakfast that morning. Let's make sure that their home was settled enough to get them out the door. Was their family involved? Did they know those people? So that we can identify their needs up front and not try to clean it up when they're acting out later.
Thank you.
Councilman Helgeson?
Thank you for being here. At
Yes,
the
sir.
beginning, you were talking about just looking at your neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
You know, seeing the fact of how many kids are in different school systems in the
Yes,
public
sir.
schools. And, you know, for decades, we've been losing schools. The school enrollment has been declining. And I'm glad that you're actually seeing it. You know, you see it in your neighborhood, but you're actually willing to ask the questions. You know, and I think about these parents, like all those that you mentioned, when they send them to a private school or something, well, parents have a tremendous amount of discomfort in their lives because they got to contribute financially. They got to transport their kids. They can't just say, come to that bus stop at Elmwood Avenue and the bus picks you up, takes you there. You don't have to pay for it and all of that. And so with that, over the last several years, I've always, been asking that, and a lot of times people always have excuses. Well, it's this, it's that, it's this. We're up to almost 40% of the school-age kids now in Lynchburg don't go to the public schools. What can you do to help improve education? And if it's not going to improve, can we look at the budget to rather than taxing these parents twice, that one, they're paying for the public schools, secondly, they're having to take money and time out of their own resources to educate their children elsewhere. What do we do about that other than just ask those questions? What would you see as a possibility?
I think we need to make our public schools inviting and impressive. And I'm going to just reflect on EC Glass because that's where I went and that's where my children went. And EC Glass still has a very good reputation, but some of that reputation has changed through the years. And I think we have to make it so appealing and for not just our Go Center kids or our STEM kids, but for children who want to be, students who want to be auto technicians and cosmetologists and CNAs. And I think the counties have gotten ahead of us on that. They have significantly more tech programs, and we're catching up. But I think we have to look at what's the whole child need. And as you pointed out, what do the families need from us?
Thank you.
Councilman Mischins?
So, how are you?
Good, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
One of the things, kind of dovetailing on some of your comments before, sometimes I feel like parents might be leaving the public school system because there might be a lack of choice. And considering that, what's your position on the school board establishing charter schools in the city of Lynchburg?
I think that's tricky. Charter schools have a place. I don't know of any. I've never had much experience with that information. But my concerns about charter schools are that they're harder to monitor. They dip from a very specific pool, usually. They do not have children who have specific academic needs or challenges. They usually do not have students who have demographic challenges or the insecurities that we have talked about. And in that way, if that charter school has fairly high achieving students with very involved parents or moderately involved parents, then their success is going to be pretty easy to measure because they're probably set up for success. That addresses a portion of our students. It does not address nearly the population that we serve in Lynchburg.
Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, good to see you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
How would you go about addressing the low reading rate in schools?
Well, I looked some of those up, and I was pleased that they have come up a little bit. The math scores and science scores, not so much, but the reading scores. And I think that's a tribute to the schools. I think we need to engage children and parents immediately. I think we need to read to our children the minute they're born, as such, and encourage it and make it easy. Some children do not have access to books or any reading material except through their school library, which, you know, they're funded and staffed and their resources. But I like the idea of having parents come in and read. As a parent, I read to Bedford Hills students for 9 years in a row, and they were delightful, and those children are wonderful. But you could tell the children who were read to and the children who were not. So if we can make reading materials more accessible, and if we can identify in a way that is respectful and supportive any parent who struggles with reading themselves, and perhaps help them to feel comfortable and confident in their own reading, then they have better access and better willingness to share that love of reading with their children. One of my children does not love reading, and it concerned me a great deal because I love all my books. And his second grade teacher, who was wonderful, Cheryl Hughes at Bedford Hills, she said to me, he did not have a problem reading. I had a problem with how he read. And she said, I needed to understand that he would read for information, for recipes, for directions, for what he needed, but not to look for him to pick up a book and sit on the porch and love reading like I do, but to make sure that he could read at a level that was going to allow him to function well in the adult world. And I think if we can make that our goal, then the reading levels will improve.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
What is the biggest threat to Lynchburg City Schools?
A physical threat, emotional threat, what are we talking about?
Whatever you determine by the question.
Okay. I think the violence that has increased in our city is seeping into our schools. And I hear in our community, oh, this school has all of these fights, and this school has a gun, and they found this at that school. But I think we have to look at that as a community issue that threatens the school, not a school issue by itself. The students come in with certain behaviors and choices at some places in their lives. And I think that the feeling of not being safe in school is a dreadful feeling. And I do think that that is a big threat to our students staying in school, participating in school, or in fact even choosing Lynchburg City schools. A second threat is the achievement gap. where there are students who are achieving very, very well. And we can look at the graduations, how much scholarship money has been awarded, the places they're going to school, or the tech centers that they're choosing, or their future plans. But there's also a large number of students who don't have any of that, and perhaps don't quite have or barely have the skills to function in a job.
If I may, the Lynchburg Police Department put out their annual report showing that homicides are down by approximately 30%. Robberies are down by 20 to 25%. I'm waiting for my tablet to refresh so I can get you the
Okay,
accurate
sure,
numbers.
that's
So
fine.
forgive me if they're slightly inaccurate.
It's okay.
But my point is that violent crime, statistically, according to the Lynchburg Police Department, is on the decrease over the last few years. So considering those things, how would you then maybe recharacterize or clarify or maybe amend what you said about the violence in the city?
Well, I'll just give you a quick example. 3 or so weeks ago, I was in Walmart on Old Forest Road, getting all those things that I'd forgotten to get the day before. And there was a woman who looked 40-ish, perhaps, over here, and she's self-checking. And she had 3 children who looked elementary to maybe early middle. They were girls. And something occurred, and she got very loud, and she was screaming vulgarities and threatening statements to an employee, which startled me, and I looked up, and here are these children looking at her, and other children in the store, of course. The employee then turned around, very dramatically took off her vest, threw it on the ground, on the floor, and started screaming vulgarities and threats back at her. And it scared me for a moment, but my big thought at that point was, what are those children learning? What are they seeing? How in the world do they think that's okay? If their parent does that, then are they going to take that to school? Do they take that to their community? Do they take that to their social opportunities? I think we need to address those issues that come into school.
Madam Mayor, just briefly, since I cited it and I had to pull my phone out because my tablet's being slow, I just want the record to, be more accurate. We've seen a 35% decrease in homicides, 27% decrease in robberies. We've seen a 15% decrease in larceny, 13% decrease in burglary, and a 34% decrease in auto theft, according to Lynchburg Police Department. Thank you.
Good.
So I'm not sure if you were outside when I was asking the previous candidates these questions, but I was talking about how school boards across the nation, to include ours, have taken on more of a political, have had to face more political issues rather than really what they're charged with is just dealing with education. I mean, schools should be dealing with educating our children, therefore the school board should be making decisions about education in the schools. And the world we live in now is that we see more and more that the school board is taking and dealing with more political issues, even more so than even city and town councils around the country, which tend to be the more political of the boards or councils. With that said, a lot of the political issues that school boards are being faced with tend to be social issues, politics in the classrooms, parents complaining on either side of the aisle about politicians, social issues that people feel should be addressed maybe at home instead, where kids are being, the term indoctrination was mentioned earlier, or indoctrinated. And so school boards are having to make decisions and vote on certain issues that have gotten parents extremely passionate or vocal. And so that is something that I think, current school board candidates have to consider, that you'll be put in that position to vote on issues like that. Our school board recently, just in the last couple of weeks, had to vote on a transgender policy. That the basic gist of that issue was that natural-born males, whatever they were assigned at birth, were to go to the bathroom and changing room that they were their natural assigned gender would send them to, so that they could not go into girls' bathrooms or changing rooms. And that was what the school board voted to support. Had you been part of that vote, what would you have voted?
I honestly think that the issue of restrooms and who uses what restrooms has gotten way blown out of proportion. I think that what we all need in a restroom is a little time and privacy, regardless of what is on the door. If it says male, female, family, or whatever it says. I would have voted, if I could, for gender-neutral bathrooms and to have restrooms just accessible, so that people could use whatever facility they were comfortable with.
So, again, I guess the point is understanding that you will be put in those positions now and to not only make decisions for education and academic decisions, but understanding that you'll have most likely more decisions like that in front of you, and the pressure that a lot of us feel here in these chamber where we have very vocal groups coming in, and the stress and pressure of those groups that also the school boards feel, and knowing that that's going to be something you're dealing with, and your feeling on that and comfort level of being faced with votes like that. How do you feel with that pressure?
Well, in my work, I sometimes have to make unpopular recommendations to courts or to lawyers. I don't relish that, but it is part of the job from time to time. My view on education is that we all can learn something from everyone and that we need to hear all sides. I don't feel that we need to micromanage everything that's being said in a classroom, as long as it is being said in an educational way, not an indoctrination or this is right or wrong, or if it's value-laden. But having to make a decision on a tough issue is part of the responsibility. It protects the schools, it protects the citizens, it protects the children. And I'm prepared to have to make those hard decisions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dr. Wilder?
Yes. Again, thank you for coming in. We really appreciate it. Y'all served on the school board for 9 years, served on the city council for 8 years. And over the time, from Lynchburg, so I've seen it, the dynamics change over the years. It's gotten more challenging lately. What can you bring to the table to bring more unity to the school board and city council?
I think we have to start out with the notion that we really are all on the same team. If as a school board member, I'm on the team for, first of all, the students, and the students then, by relation, of course, their families. And if we start out with that idea that we're on the same team, that maybe we can put some of the divisiveness aside, and maybe not, but we have to understand that as individuals, we're going to have strong feelings and strong beliefs about things, but they can be issues and situations and circumstances, and they don't have to be personalized or understood as something wrong with your character if you don't agree with me. I think we have to stay with issues to the best for our citizens and our children.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Oh, thank you. Let's see. What roles, if any, do you think the district should have in dealing with issues, societal issues such as poverty, mental illness, and drug abuse?
I think that the school board needs to be front and center, and the district needs to be front and center, because they are the issues that our children bring into school. They may not have the addiction. We never want that or never hope for that, but we have to understand what families they're coming from and what neighborhoods they're coming from and what environments they're coming from. Poverty creates stress, all the way back to the war on poverty with Lyndon Johnson. The studies say if you are living in poverty, you live in stress. And if your parents or whoever your caregiver is talking about that, I don't know if we can get the electric bill paid. I don't know if we'll have food tomorrow. The line was too long at Parkview. I couldn't get a meal. Then the child comes in with that much more stress. And that's part of the trauma response. If we can know something about those parts of our children, then we can intervene to promote better educational opportunities.
Thank you.
I guess just to kind of follow up on that, you know, lots of times I hear from the school administration or board, kind of like what you've had, that there's problems with housing insecurity, food insecurity, and all these things. And I just think about my dad's upbringing. And I think about the fact that his father came a long time ago, but fought in World War I, where they had mustard gas. They came back, lots of them were alcoholics. And then my father grows up on a subsistence farm. And with that, you then keep on growing up, and then you have the Great Depression. And then when you're 19 or I think 19, maybe 20, you're now called for service with the draft to go fight in World War II. And so many times I recognize their stress. And sometimes I think I keep hearing that it's almost like an excuse, rather than recognizing that there's always been stress and there's always trouble. But now what can we do with that to move forward? You know, many times over the years when we've interviewed and had school boards and administrators, always is, well, the reason the scores are low is because X, Y, and Z. We need to do reading, writing, and arithmetic, whether you're in the 1800s, whether you're in 2024, whether you're in the 1920s. I mean, those things we still need to press forward. I think a lot of times, do the children hear, like you just mentioned, they hear about, oh, we can't pay the electric bill or all that. Lots of times these excuses that are you know, valid, I realize, but they're now front and center on a child, rather than saying, regardless, we're going to press forward. How do you get that? How do you get those negatives out of the equation and say, hey, if we don't, we're not going to blame it on the fact that we didn't have enough resources. We're not going to blame it on the fact that we didn't have electric buses or we didn't have all these little blaming. Let's focus on the mission of making sure these kids learn to read, write, and do arithmetic. How do we do that?
Well, I think what you're talking about is resilience. And in the literature, in my field, there's a lot of discussion about resilience. And that is, short version, being okay anyway. But how do you get there? And that is teaching and learning how to manage stress, how to manage crisis, to do some critical thinking in a situation. But there's also an element in our schools and the phrase is relative deprivation. If I'm coming to school without many of these things, or with insecurities about my basic needs, and I see many other students who don't seem to have those challenges, that's an additional stress. We're never all going to be equal. There's always going to be someone whose life is a little easier and a lot of people whose lives are a little harder. But we have to figure out in our management of resilience, what do we do with that? And that's part of the challenge of building resiliency, and that does reduce stress.
Well, we have about less than a minute left, so I just want to thank you so much for your time and appreciate you coming today, and I wish you a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, when will the decisions be made and how would we be notified?
Our next meeting on the 25th.
The 25th, thank you.
Yes, thanks again. Okay, the meeting is now adjourned. Our next meeting will be held Monday, June 17th, 2024 at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. I was going to say p.m. here. It says p.m. on mine, but 9 a.m., y'all. It's not a late night here in Council Chamber.